Next, we're going to do our Brussels sprouts. So Brussels sprouts are available late fall and early winter, which is why Brussels sprouts are oftentimes a meal staple at Thanksgiving and Christmas meals. Now, Brussels sprouts are my favorite vegetable, so we have Brussels sprouts in this household once, sometimes even twice, sometimes even more times per week. So we always have Brussels sprouts around. And I am proud to say that my favorite recipe for Brussels sprouts has converted many a Brussels sprout hater into a Brussels sprout lover. So check out rexbariatrics.com under Holiday Recipes 2019. Look for Margaret's favorite Brussels sprout recipe and give it a try. Maybe you'll surprise yourself. So with Brussels sprouts, we want to make sure that we choose Brussels sprouts that are not discolored and are not turning yellow. We also want to avoid any Brussels sprouts that smell. That means that they've already started to go bad. So I'm going to remove the discolored leaves from the Brussels sprouts. Now, Brussels sprouts come in a variety of sizes. So we have a larger Brussels sprout like this guy, or we can have a smaller Brussels sprout like this guy. Now, the smaller Brussels sprouts, they tend to be a little bit sweeter, so they tend to taste a little bit better than some of these larger Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are in the same family of vegetables as cabbage, so they do tend to have a more mild flavor once you cook them. Although you can still eat raw Brussels sprouts, they're a great addition to any salad or any coleslaw or anything like that. So with the Brussels sprout, what I do first, I take this Brussels sprout and I cut the base off. All right, so I take off the root, I throw that out. Now I have just the head of a Brussels sprout. I lay it flat side down on my cutting board and I slice it in half. So there we go, I'm left with 2 halves of a Brussels sprout. Now with these halved Brussels sprouts, I can throw them on a roasting pan with some olive oil spray, maybe a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, roast them at 425 for about 20 to 25 minutes, and they're a great side dish for your protein. But you can also shred Brussels sprouts, and sometimes recipes call for shredded Brussels sprouts, either raw or cooked. So you can buy shredded Brussels sprouts, but you are going to pay for that convenience, and Brussels sprouts are so easy to shred. So I'm actually going to lay the half the Brussels sprout flat side down, and I'm just going to run my knife, cutting it into very thin strips. You can do the other half, and there we go. We have some shredded Brussels sprouts. Now, shredded Brussels sprouts you want to keep in the refrigerator in a stored Ziploc bag or a sealed container. You can keep them for a couple days, or you can keep the whole Brussels sprouts for about 5 to 7 days in the refrigerator. You can keep them either washed or unwashed. So give Brussels sprouts a try, you might love them. All right, so we chopped our baby cabbage when we chopped our Brussels sprouts. Now we are chopping our full-grown cabbage. Of course, remember, they're not the same vegetables, but they are the same family. So we have our full-size cabbage. Full-size cabbage is available late fall to early spring, so it's actually cabbage season right now, which is how I ended up with this massive head of cabbage. So we have our cabbage quartered already because we did quarter it to wash it. And with our cabbage, we always want to make sure we cut out that inedible core. So to do that, I lay it flat and I just kind of cut a V through the cabbage, and the core is now gone, and this is nice and edible. Now, cabbage, you can do a couple things with it. You can shred cabbage and eat it raw in things like coleslaw. You can saute cabbage in a Dutch oven or a fry pan with a little bit of olive oil spray, some salt and some pepper, saute it for a couple minutes and it'll be nice and cooked. Everyone has their own recipes for cabbage. So if we are going to shred the cabbage, we are just going to cut thin strips like that. And there we go, we have our slaw already ready. Now, something that I love to do with cabbage, I actually love to roast it in the oven in the form of cabbage steaks. So with cabbage steaks, what we do is we are going to cut the cabbage, not the onion, cut the cabbage into wedges like this, and then we'll actually put this wedge of the cabbage on a roasting pan, roast it for about 20 to 30 minutes, and the edges will get nice and caramelized. It's really delicious. You just need to spray it with a little bit of olive oil spray, again, some salt and pepper, and it'll roast up really nice. But it's completely up to you what you want to do with cabbage. It's very versatile. Now, fun fact, you can actually freeze cabbage. You can either freeze it like this, already shredded. Of course, if you do that, you want to make sure you cook it once you get it out of the freezer. And if you freeze it, it will only last in the freezer for about 4 to 8 weeks. So you'll need to use it within about 2 months. If you don't want to freeze your cabbage, just want to keep it in the refrigerator, you want to keep it in the whole cabbage head, and that way it will last for about 2 to 4 weeks in the refrigerator, just in an open bag. So cabbage lasts for a really long time, but if you do happen to find some old cabbage in the back of your refrigerator, just shred it up and throw it in the freezer. Check out, again, rexbariatrics.com. We did an amazing recipe that was beef and cabbage stir fry. It is a family favorite in this household. We have it probably once a month, and it's done in about 15 minutes, so give it a try sometime. Next, we're moving on to cauliflower. So cauliflower is available year-round, although it is best in the fall and early winter. But cauliflower is great because it is extremely versatile. Of course, we've all heard of mashed cauliflower, which is a low-carb take on mashed potatoes. We've also heard of cauliflower rice, which again is a low-carb take on rice. You can slice wedges of the cauliflower and roast them and make a cauliflower steak. That has recently become very popular. Something else I've seen, you can make cauliflower wings. Just make sure that if you make cauliflower wings, you do not add a lot of fat as you cook it. You can roast cauliflower, you can saute cauliflower, you can even eat cauliflower raw with a little bit of hummus or a little bit of Greek yogurt vegetable dip. So cauliflower can go a lot of different ways if you have one on hand. So with cauliflower, we want to make sure that we choose cauliflower that doesn't have a lot of discolored spots. I do have a few discolored spots in here, so I'll make sure to kind of cut around that, but the cauliflower looks pretty good overall. Now the first thing that we do with cauliflower is we actually want to remove these green stalks at the bottom. They're not edible, so if you have few stalks, you can rip them off with your hands and just remove them on your own. This one has a lot of stalks on the bottom though, so I'm actually going to use a knife to get in there, chop off those stalks, and then I can use my hand to get some of those smaller stalks off as well. Some of the smaller leaves you can leave in place. Some of the really delicate leaves, they'll roast absolutely fine with your cauliflower. Now that we've gotten the majority of those stalks off, I know I didn't get it off perfectly, we're going to cut the cauliflower head in half. So hopefully this is easier than cutting that cabbage head in half. We're going to take our large knife and we're going to cut it perfectly in half. So I'm going to set one half of the cauliflower aside. I'm going to use that later. And we are left with a half a head of cauliflower. Now with the half a head of cauliflower, we can actually see the stalk inside of the cauliflower. It's that nice V-shaped thing. Now we want to make sure we cut that stalk or that core out. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use my knife and I'm going to cut a V. Cut the V of that core right out so you can see I made that V, and then I'm just going to use my knife and remove that. Now this cauliflower had a pretty big core, so I'm going to cut a little bit bigger. Make sure we get all that core out. And once we have that core out, our cauliflower starts to kind of fall apart. So let me clear off my cutting board a little bit, get all these extra soft pieces off. And we have our cored cauliflower. So it really starts to break apart in our hands, as we can see. It's very easy. You don't necessarily need to use a knife. We have some cauliflower pieces ready to go. If you have larger pieces, you do want to cut these in half so that everything cooks a lot more level, a lot more evenly. So we cut that in half. I'm actually going to cut this one into fourths because it was so large. Some of the smaller pieces, they're absolutely fine the way that they are. We can cut it like that too. Now, if you wanted to make cauliflower rice, it is super easy to make on your own and can save you a little bit of money. All you would do is you would throw these pieces of cauliflower into a food processor and you would pulse it until it has a nice rice-like consistency. Now with cauliflower rice, it is delicious, but I like to give this warning. If you're not prepared for it to be cauliflower, it will not taste good because you cannot pretend too much that cauliflower is rice. So my number one advice is doctor it up. I like to make cauliflower rice and add cilantro and lime. I like to make cauliflower rice and add lemon juice and parsley. Sometimes I even make cauliflower rice with a little bit of homemade enchilada sauce and have that alongside. Good recipe would be the creamy enchilada chicken. So a lot of things to do with cauliflower. Is very versatile. Now for storing cauliflower, you want to store it whole. You can wash it first, but you want to make sure that it's very, very dry. So you want to use your towel to actually pat it dry. Wrap it very tightly in plastic and it will keep for only about 5 days. Now after that 5-day time, you do want to use it up, or you can cut it up and actually freeze it. Just make sure you freeze it. If you freeze it, it will only keep for a couple months. So get some cauliflower and try out some new recipes. Last but not least, we have something similar to cauliflower. We have broccoli. So it is the greener version of cauliflower. It is the more vitamin stocked version of cauliflower. And broccoli, unfortunately, is not really available this time of year. It's best in the winter and in the fall, which is why finding a good head of broccoli was almost impossible at the store recently. So with broccoli, we want to choose broccoli with firm green heads and tightly bound florets. So we want to make sure it's staying nice together. If it's separating out too much, it's not going to be quite as fresh. And with broccoli, we want to make sure that we remove any drying out or miscoloring or even yellowing pieces because they have already passed their prime. So you can do a lot of things with broccoli. Broccoli you can add to a cauliflower rice stir fry. It can be a great way to add some greens to that. You can eat broccoli raw, again, with some hummus or some Greek yogurt vegetable dip. But my family's personal favorite way of making broccoli is to roast the florets of broccoli on a roasting pan. A little bit of olive oil spray, a little bit of salt and pepper, and some freshly minced garlic sprinkled across the broccoli. Roast it until it starts to get a little bit browned, and then once you take it out of the oven, squeeze some fresh lemon juice on it and about a tablespoon of Parmesan. We call it magic broccoli, and it is the #1 way to fall in love with broccoli. So give it a try sometime. It's very good. So with broccoli, what we want to do, we want to remove some of the leaves that are on here. But the first thing we want to do is we actually want to cut off the stalks of broccoli. So I'm going to cut off this base of broccoli because we don't really want to eat this base of broccoli. But we are left with little florets of broccoli. So with these, we want to cut as close as possible to the floret. And then with that, we can take them and cut them into smaller sections. So we have that. Again, we take the section of broccoli, cut it and break it or cut it into smaller pieces. We want to make sure if we have really large pieces of broccoli, we cut those smaller so that everything cooks evenly. But don't forget about your broccoli stalks. Remember, a lot of people throw these out and you pay for them. They are safe to eat. You might as well eat them. You might as well use them. So with the broccoli stalks, what I do, you want to make sure you can use your paring knife to either cut off some of the limbs or cut off some of the leaves that might still be present. Or if you have a bigger stalk, you can actually use a peeler. And with the peeler, you can again cut off some of those limbs, cut off some of those extra leaves that are growing on the bottom. And once we have the stalk of broccoli all nicely clean, we can actually cut it into coins and roast it right alongside that broccoli. So again, you can roast it with the broccoli, you can add it to a stir fry with the broccoli. It's completely edible, and again, you pay for it, so you might as well use it. So enjoy your broccoli. Just remember, use it quickly, use it before it gets too dried out and too yellowed. You want to store unwashed broccoli in the refrigerator in an open bag, and normally they last for about a week, but some of the broccoli in the store nowadays won't last you that long, so you gotta use it quickly. But try out my magic broccoli recipe. It's a great way to fall in love with broccoli. Thanks for joining us today for this veggie cutting demo. I hope you learned some new things about vegetables, and I hope you learned some new ways to try and enjoy vegetables. So use this time to get out there and safely get some fresh vegetables and try new ways to prepare them for your family. So I hope you guys stay safe, enjoy the rest of your quarantine, and hopefully we'll see you back in the office soon.